Friends, welcome to For the One podcast, 2025, more like 2020 Thrive. First guest of the year, Jon Brannberg.
That was your line?
That was my line.
All right.
I told you
Let's
I
go.
had a pretty fire line.
Ready to thrive.
Dude,
Yeah.
thrive. Isn't
Let's
that
go.
good? Isn't
Let's
that
go.
good?
Let's thrive.
I was driving,
Thrive.
sipping my Monk and Mongoose coffee, eating my lemon seed poppy bread on the way to work, and I said, what's going to be the first sentence of our podcast in 2025?
And that was, all right.
Little prophetic word for us, little thrive. Welcome back, guys. I'm Cole Walker. This is
John Dixon.
And we're hosting the For the One podcast, and our first guest of the year for our interview series that we're continuing is our senior pastor, Jon Brannberg.
What up, everybody? Excited to be here. I've heard so many good things about all the podcasting, and get to be a part of it now. Let's go.
Sweet.
It's definitely been an adventure so far.
It's been a good adventure.
It's been, yeah. We've had a lot of really awesome people on the podcast. Michelle's episode last week, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. Or not last week, but last month was absolutely incredible.
Before we ask this first question, as we get to know our senior pastor a little better, just for the One podcast, we are planning on releasing one podcast a month for 2025. And we're trying to have that on a consistent schedule. So the third week of every month, there will be a podcast dropping. So stay tuned on wherever you listen to your podcast for that schedule. But should we get into it?
Yeah, I'm trying to process Spodcast. How do they not capitalize on that? That's an amazing.
Wow, that is pretty good. Ask that first question, Mr. Dixon. Let's get
sir.
into it.
So just as a quick introduction, like, who are you? What is it that you do? Obviously, senior pastor, but like, kind of explain that role in terms of OneLife, and then family. Just what is that looking like for you?
Yeah. Well, I think so many people know a lot of my stories and my family because, I give like bits and pieces just about every time I talk. And so honestly, I'm pretty excited about, filling in blanks today and that kind of thing.
Let's go.
But obviously, me and Joanna have been married for 15 years now.
Come on.
So yeah, more in love with her than ever before. It's been awesome. And then we have 4 kiddos, Judah, who's 11, Joy, 10, Josie, 8, and Joel, 7. And we're just in like a great season.
Come on.
Kids are just learning and growing, and I honestly feel like being a dad and being a husband is like the most important job that I have, even ahead of the church, and especially right now with the kids of how critical their faith journey is and how. Anyway, so
Totally.
yeah, so obviously my job is the church, but my priorities are obviously, my marriage and the kids, and I see the church as like, my third priority. So
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
As it should be.
That is why you're
As
on
it
this
should be.
podcast.
Come on.
Let's
Thanks
go.
for letting us into that.
yeah.
Would you give us one of the things we always ask on this podcast, because we're bringing different people in our community, and obviously people know your role in the community. Would you give us your faith story? How you got to being a pastor, being a church planner in Denver? How you personally fell in love with Jesus? Would you fill in that gap for us today?
Yeah. Well, I'm honestly excited to share that because, like I said, I've shared like bits and pieces, but like never really the full story because it's just too long to share.
Yeah.
My faith journey really started young, like, when I, that 1 Timothy verse, like, don't let anyone look down at you because you're young. That was like my motto when I was, 10, 11, 12, 14 years old. And so my journey started real young. When I was, second grade, they had like what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be a pastor. Like I knew very young that God had called me, and I had read, I knew all the Bible stories, and I loved the story of Samuel and like God speaking to Samuel, when he was young, and my parents always, they always reinforced that idea that like you don't have to wait till you're older to have a relationship with God. Like you can have that relationship with God now. And so I learned the Bible young. I knew, the Bible stories. I was like, if you've seen my kids around church, like I was little mini Judah,
Let's go.
just like at church all the time. And honestly, I didn't see it as like a burden. I just saw it as like, man, this is just what we do. And we're a part of God's family. And yeah, so really I was trying to think about it. When I was about 9-10 years old, 3rd, 4th grade, our church had like a guest speaker come in, and we had like an encounter night. And this was like he was like considered a prophet, like he operated in the prophetic.
Yeah.
And we were, going after the Lord and worship that night. And I have this distinct memory of there was a 20-something-year-old that was there, and he was just like going after Jesus with his hands up for like 10 minutes straight. And this prophetic guy speaker came over and just like prophesied over him, and I was like right next to him, like, oh my goodness, what is happening? That
is awesome.
And it is real surprising when that starts happening.
Yeah, he was just like hungry for God, and I like knew the verses, I knew the Bible, but I don't think I had that kind of hunger for God yet. I was 9 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so then it was my turn. Like then the guy came over to me, and I was like, "Whoa,
that's not scary at all."
Yeah. So he spoke into my life, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, just be hungry for God. And so I was like, I'm just gonna be like the guy next to me.
Hey.
Kind of we talk about that encounter, like if we can see somebody else encounter God, then we'll just follow suit. And so
imitation teaches us.
Yeah. So anyway, I got prayed over that night, and there was one prophetic word that really I didn't understand at the time, but the guy basically said, like, you're going to have a heart like David.
Dude.
And like, I didn't know what that meant. And I was like,
yeah,
cool, great. And then my parents, like, they came up to me afterwards, like, did you hear what he prayed for you about? I was like, yeah, heart like David, cool. No, it was like, yeah, you know what that means? Like, let's. So I started digging into David, and like I started understanding how he was a worshiper, and I'd always loved worship and music, and so anyway, that word really like was a prophetic word that I didn't understand at the time.
Whoa!
Yeah.
What a story around what a prophetic word can do.
Yeah,
that is powerful.
Yeah,
and formational. Clearly,
totally.
That had a lot of truth to it.
Yeah, and I think the key thing as well is that there was people in my life, my parents, that like cultivated that,
reinforcing that calling and not.
Yeah, they didn't let it go.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it just happened one time, but like it was reinforced.
They helped you hold on to that word.
Yeah, and they helped me understand it later.
Wow.
So, and I remember after that, I said, I remember getting a heart to lead worship, like that seed was planted.
Yeah,
because I knew that like I was gifted at worship, or I was gifted at singing and holding a pitch, and and I was taking piano lessons.
Yep.
And so I told my dad, I was like, Dad, when I'm 10 years old, I'm gonna start leading worship. That was like a year from now, and I didn't start leading worship at 10.
Shocker.
I was like, no way. Is this about to happen?
Shocker. No, but my dad later would remind me of that, and he would bring that back up to me, of like, man, worship's going to be like a defining part of your life.
Nice.
So,
that's beautiful. I think just as we continue to operate in the gifts here and the prophetic words, I think a lot of times with prophetic words, we're just like, oh, that's so cool. Like God spoke. I had like a cool goosebumpy moment. Yeah. And we don't like hold words. We just kind of forget about
them. You gotta write it down. You gotta think about it.
But if it's like an actual word from the Lord, like if it actually is God speaking, prophesying, like cultivating something in your life, then you hold on to that. And if you hold on to that, that's what we're supposed to do with those words. So that's just, what a cool story on how to handle a prophetic word as an individual and in community, and the fruit that can come
Yeah.
from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how that's that came to bless so many people. So, anyways,
Yeah.
keep going. I just
Yeah.
love that.
Dude, yeah. So, it's a couple years passed, and our church I was in 6th grade, and I was kind of like that awkward 6th grader that like there was high schoolers that like had gone through puberty, and I was like this, you know, this little squeaky high, small,
Yeah.
100-pound 6th grader.
Yeah.
And our church was going to a youth retreat. It was like a 5-day youth retreat. We did summer camps at
Whoa.
the time. It was like
Oh,
come
it was
on,
a
somebody.
5-day,
Please.
4-night, 5-night.
God bless them youth pastors.
Yeah, and
Woo.
I didn't want to go mainly because I had no context of what that meant. I had no idea. Like they were like, "It's gonna be amazing." I was like, "I have no idea what that means." I remember my parents like bribed me to go.
Yeah.
They forced me, like they offered me whatever video games, or I don't know what I wanted at the time, but they bribed me, made me go. And there was 900 kids at this youth camp, 5 days, and everybody was just like going after the Lord. And the first night I was like, in the back, like sitting down, like some of the 6th graders on their first night. And then I started like going in the deep end and, started worshiping the Lord, like with my hands up and, like probably for the first time. And that was really where my faith became my own. That's why I'm always an advocate of going on a retreat.
Definitely.
Because I believe, honestly, especially that first one is like critical in your faith journey. If you can do what I did and like, engage and go deeper.
Yep.
And I remember there was one of the guest speakers was Christine Kane at the time, and
Whoa,
that was like early Hillsong days before she was even like nationally or globally known. And she had a message about being about the Father's business. And when Jesus was 12 years old and was in the temple and wanted to spend time, as much time in the temple as possible. And then Mary and Joseph lost him, and they came up to him and said, "Where were you, Jesus?" And Jesus was like, "Duh, I was being about the Father's business."
Right.
And that's when it really clicked for me of like, this isn't my parents, this is mine. This is like me, like not just in the family business of pastoring people, but like I I believe that 12-year-old time, 10, 11, 12 is like critical. But for me, that's when like it was like no looking back. I'm going to be a pastor. I'm going to follow Christ. I'm going to be on fire for him. I'm going to spend as much time in his presence as I can. So yeah, that was like, that message really defined me.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Retreat moments are one of those like really cool testimonies, especially because we're still doing them, right? This is not like, it's not a lost art. The art of the retreat is still something that is alive. We still give 11, 12, 13-year-olds that opportunity and invite them to make their faith their own. And I just think that's one of the most defining things, at least about what we do here at OneLife. I don't know about other churches or if they put as much focus or as much like, concern into how are we setting up this retreat. I feel like a lot of places just let it be fun camp for kids, but we really go into it with this like, kids are going to get saved, kids are going to make their faith their own, and that's going to change the direction of their lives. And I imagine at least some of that heart that has been implanted into OneLife definitely comes from your testimony of having your life radically changed in that way.
Totally. And I as I think about like what that weekend does and even what we've seen it do here at OneLife when we do a retreat is like you have to get uncomfortable. Yeah. You are totally away from all of the things that are your security blanket, your TV, your whatever.
It's your parents.
And even for men that go on a men's retreat of like, that is a defining moment because I'm putting effort into being here and I'm going to, and if you allow yourself to let your walls down, it will define and change your life.
Yep.
And the presence of God obviously is what changed my life in worship, and that particular place that I went to, that they were all about like worship, and they spent 2 hours of worship, and that's when like I fell in love with worship. And I came back and I was like, okay, I need to get back on that prophetic word that God told me a couple years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
so
good.
God brought it back on my mind of like worship, and that's when that like prophetic word really took place in my life.
There's a book that was released 2024 called Forming Faith. That just had a lot of data. It's from the Awana guys, which Awana's massive children's organization for children's ministry, and the numbers behind people coming to faith before they're 18, and how those experiences, like the story you just described, is so forming for like 3 out of 4 or 3 out of 5 Christians, like that. It's just so high, the numbers with that, and so your story combined with that, it's why we're so make the next gen such a priority here.
Totally.
Because these experiences form faith, and then they form you for the rest of your life. Example, Jon Brannberg and OneLife. Like, that's what these words and these worship moments and these encounters and this understanding of God can do at such a young age. So praise God. Well, keep going.
Yeah.
12 years old, worship encounter,
so I came back,
Christine came.
Yeah, I came back home. I was, the awkward, I think I was going to 7th grade year, and I was going to middle school. And, I just decided I'm going to be on fire for God. Like that, like the on fire
resolve.
Revelation, what is it? Revelations 2, when Jesus says, don't be lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. And I had a shirt that was like red hot, and everyone was like, what does that mean? I'm like, I'm hot for Jesus.
Yes.
7th grade kid walking around.
This is so good.
And when everybody else was like focused on popularity, like I was like the not unpopular, I was just the awkward, like Jesus loving kid that brought my Bible to church and wore the, but I like people, they respected me for it because I wasn't like, I knew what I wanted. And so I started a Bible club in 7th grade. My first message, I talked about forgiveness. I have no idea why anybody in 7th grade would need to forgive people, but that was like, I was like, God's forgiveness, it's kind of important. We should all know about it.
Come on.
And so anyway, I started like, speaking to my Bible club every week, and then high school rolled around, and our worship leader left at church, and so my dad came back up to me. He's like, John, you remember when like you said you were gonna lead worship, like you said you were gonna do that at 10 and you're 14 now, maybe you should like get on that. So they signed me up for guitar lessons, and like 6 months later, our little church, I grew up in a little church of like 50, so like I was like one of 4 teenagers there, and like we could barely scrap a band together on Sunday morning, and 6 months into learning how to lead worship, I was leading worship at church. Man. And we never hired another like worship pastor. Like 14 to 18, I was the worship leader at church. And that really defined me, because I was like, I realized I didn't just have a place in the church later, but I could take a role in the church now.
Yes.
Say it.
Woo!
Yep.
Yes.
So anyway, like high school was just amazing, because I was just on fire for God, and I got a friend who was like, he was cool and a little bit character issues, but like he could bring people to church.
Come on.
And I was like the consistent, kid who knew everything about the Bible, and we worked together, and we had like, 50 kids coming to youth group every Wednesday. Our youth group was bigger than the church.
Let's go. Come on.
That's a blast.
Come on.
Come on.
So anyway, like high school was just all about, God's presence, and I was a sponge, and just like we just saw, honestly, like a little mini revival in our church and the church never grew more than 50, but for me, I was growing in my faith. I started preaching. Our youth pastor, about 16, left, and I became the youth pastor. So I was the worship leader, the youth pastor, and I don't know. It was just, I didn't know any better. Like
Whoa.
nobody told me like, hey,
That was abnormal.
yeah. I was just like, well, no one's doing this, so I better help.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
that was just what we did. We just
Just
filled the holes.
Yep.
And so formative for you, like clearly. I haven't heard any of this. This is like crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, pastoring and worship leading and just getting formed by that, getting that experience, seeing the power of God move in people's lives and little mini youth revival. I mean,
Yeah. And that's why
it's formative.
And that's why I love to see, like, to have youth on the stage on Sundays and in doing tech, and
yeah.
because that's like I grew the most. Our church was set up tear down, so I was setting up Sun Church,
Mhm.
from like 6th to 12th grade, and that ownership
Yep.
that I felt of God's house was really like, this isn't just, we don't just serve every once in a while. Like, no, this is our home. Like, this is what we do. This is our calling.
Mhm.
We got to be about the Father's business, right? That was like my,
mindset.
Heart
Yeah.
set.
Um,
Yeah.
All of it.
Let's go.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. You want me to keep going?
Yeah. So how did
Okay.
it take
Yeah.
you into college and like?
Yeah. So I went to college. I decided I want to study to be a pastor or whatever that means, and I started taking these classes, and I was in the Bible. I was a Bible major, so I was just just eating up the Bible, like spending time with God in the prayer room, like just falling in love with God more and more. And then God really brought it back to me. Is like, you need to be like a pivotal part of a church again, because I was kind of like in college.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh, well, I'm going to this church this week, and in this church this week, and
Yeah,
this
just
church this
kinda
week,
Yeah.
this church
hopping
this week,
around
this church is,
and-
oh, well, this church is doing this thing. And I was like, God, I don't know how to I don't know what to do. And God's like, just go find a small church.
choose somewhere and plug in.
Go find a small church that needs you.
Yeah.
So like some random Sunday, a random week during at college, this guy we're looking for a worship leader and also a youth pastor, and we can pay that person $5,000.
Sign me
year.
up.
You're like,
I walked by and I was like,
I've got the resume, coach.
I was like, I've been a worship leader, I've been a youth pastor, and this guy just took a chance on me.
Come on.
But it was the catch was it was an hour away, so I had to drive an hour from college. But it was like this, like the Lord just blessed it, because nobody knew about it. It was like it was this podunk small church
Yep.
in the middle of like a redneck area.
Hey.
Everybody drove trucks and wore said y'all and all the deep southern words.
Come on now.
And talked about tractors and anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like this
Truly stereotypically Southern.
yeah, this small little town, and I was like
Denver bro rolling up from Thunder Ridge High
yeah,
School.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, so I started getting back into like youth, and that's when God was like, you need to dedicate your life to youth right now, because this is like everything in your past, you can talk like I just have
speak
about
directly to it.
about what they're going through, and I
Yeah.
knew just keep challenging them like you were challenged, and so I just started challenging them to like, dude, be youth pastors in your schools, and anyway, that's when I realized like, man, the church is the vehicle for like making the name of Jesus known.
Yes.
It like again, it's the church isn't the mission. The mission's Jesus and being about the Father's business. But what did Jesus do? He was in the church. He was like, for us, we can get people to retreats
Yep.
through the church.
Yep.
We can that's when my heart for the church, like, it wasn't just like my parents are pastors, but like, no, I want to devote my life to the church because that's what God values. Is He values people, and people, we can bring as many people to Christ as possible through the church.
Yeah.
Love that.
And
I love that.
I guess that kind of leads into the second question here really well. Why does your heart burn for like what's specifically happening here at OneLife? Like, what was it that took you from youth to I want to be a lead pastor of a church, and what is it that's happening here now in our community that you're like really on fire about?
Because it's so clear how you burn for God's bride,
Mm-hmm.
and how you lay your life down for her as a pastor, and just let us into that why, a little more, kind of like you were doing.
Yeah, dude. So, I mean, for me, I think 2010 when I first started serving at Jubilee, which was our sending church. My pastor, Pastor Jon, the first time I met with him, he said, Jon, what do you want to do with your life? Like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And I was like, I want to be here. I want to be in the church. I want to be just anywhere in the church. Just put me in somewhere. It doesn't matter where, you know? And he was like, that's when you're called to be a pastor. When like you can't see yourself anywhere else. Like your heart burns for this, and you can't just go off and do something else. Like you eat, sleep, breathe. Like, we need to make Jesus famous through the local church.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of when I realized, like, I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be satisfied in like doing real estate or, in the business world or something like that. Like, I'm in it for the long
You'd feel
haul.
disobedient if you did anything else.
Yeah, totally. And I'd be like, God, like I have been, I have the skill sets, the pedigree, the calling. Like, I would just be, like you said, disobedient, running from my calling.
Right.
To be honest with you, like, I love youth, but like, it wasn't, and I love being a lead pastor, but I don't really care about the title.
Yeah.
I don't care about
Absolutely.
the role. Like, if God, if you want to put me in the game as a worship leader, like, that's the best role for me. Like, I'll do that, whatever. So when we started to think about planting a church, I was obviously hesitant because we had seen so much fruit come in the youth circle, and I was like, it can't get better.
Right.
Like,
right.
like, it was like, like when you have a great high school experience and you're like,
college
oh,
can't be better than this.
Like, that was the good old days. Like, we're always going to be talking about the good old days, and figuring out, like, and God's like, no, like, I have new assignment for you. I have new things for you. And he kind of released us. And it was also through the advice of mentors and, our pastor that says, you're ready for this now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that took a while to realize that my calling wasn't tied to the role or to the students. But then also we realized, like, we can continue to do student ministry as lead pastors. We can continue to facilitate.
Totally.
And and that's when God kind of opened our eyes to, like, the role doesn't matter. It's your heart. It's the vision, and it's the vision is Jesus, and that doesn't mean the role is controlling
it. Yeah.
To that.
Totally.
So
that's awesome.
When we started OneLife, it was obviously like, God, it can't get any better than what we just experienced. And God's like, no, like, the best days are ahead. So honestly, when I saw planting a church, I saw, like, my parents' church of 50 and like grinding it out with like set up, tear down, and never having a staff, and always just doing everything and being burnout and working 3 jobs and like, look what's happened. Like, but that's obviously, like, God, I was content with that.
Yeah.
I was fine with that
Yeah.
when we signed up to plant the church.
Yeah.
But now that we have, you guys
Staff.
and staff in this building, like I never saw any of this coming.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The Father is faithful when we're about his business.
Yeah, and I think it's just one step, and I've told you this, like, don't think 3, 10, 15 years from now, like, think, God, what am I called and faith, like, what is the gift that you've called me to steward right now?
Yeah.
Where's the hole that I'm supposed to fill right now?
Yep.
And for me, I feel like I'm fairly a visionary leader, but I'm not like so far in the future that
you miss the right now.
Yeah, like I've always been a live in the now, right here.
Yep.
Give today my best effort.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on.
Yeah.
This is like.
Come on now.
I'm learning so much
No,
right
it's
now. I
beautiful.
bet our listeners are learning too. Third question. As you are in so many leadership capacities, leading in the church, it's work, it's occupation too. It's a beautiful occupation, but a personal relationship with Jesus, tending that while in leadership. What's that been like? Your individual time with God, your individual thoughts about God in this season of life, with years of ministry behind you, years of ministry in front of you. Let us into that heart for Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like I want to go back to that prophetic word for me with David specifically of David had that incredible amount of time in his teenage years to be alone with the Lord and just to, and that was his and where he was understanding as much as he could about the Bible and writing songs and crafting his heart for the Lord. And that for me was like I had my pasture season where like that was my calling, was to like just spend hours and hours with the Lord, and I'd say to all of our young people that don't have jobs yet and responsibilities of like
take
advantage of your pasture season, because that's kind of the foundation that'll like cultivate, that you can build on for the rest of your life.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And like take advantage of the the time when you're not married, and like see your singleness as a gift.
Yeah.
And don't be in a hurry
Yep.
to get married and do all the things and work, because you'll have the rest of your life to do that. But like have your pasture season. And so for me, like I know my pasture season is not like I'm not in the pasture season anymore, where I can just spend hours on a walk with the Lord. Like I have responsibilities and kids waking me up and people to talk to and retreats to run and staff to oversee and stuff like that. But like that, I know what the pasture season feels like, and like my heart longs for that, wants it.
Yeah.
But that's because I've experienced it.
Yeah.
I've encountered it before.
That's good.
So you got to have that reference of like, this is what the pasture season of with the Lord, with my harp and Jesus and my guitar. And, I used to stay up when I was, a high schooler, like just playing piano till like 3, 4, 5 a.m., like worshiping the Lord. And my mom would wake up and I would be going to bed.
No more.
And I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with the Bible, and like I got deeper. Like Psalms 119 says, like I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. And so like there's a season that I had of just like hiding the word in my heart, and now like a lot of my I'm just referencing old memories with the Lord. Like
wow,
totally.
I'm just referencing, I'm going back in the encyclopedia and I'm rediscovering like, oh yeah, I remember that, like that verse and how impact. Oh yeah, like must be about the Father's business. Like I was thinking about that today. It was just like recaptivating that
Yeah.
memory.
What's so clear about your story is how the first 25 years of your life are forming, and those experiences with God are forming and fueling everything God's doing now.
Yeah.
Like so clear in every story you've told, even in just you articulating that just now. And it makes me realize why why us as a staff and like from you guys, the priority for the next generation is so huge.
Yeah. Totally.
Like that's a top-down thing at our church. It's not like us like there's churches where youth is like the stepchild that doesn't get any funding or attention or like that just like whatever. Here it's like priority and capital and life, and we want to do this and elevate this, and that makes so much sense. And hearing your story and your life and how much fruit and how much blessing, how much ministry, how the heaven is coming to earth through the youthful season of your life.
Yeah.
And Joanna's too. I mean, Joanna's always referencing her college prayer room days and her childhood in the presence of God and worship and wow.
Yeah, and I would also say that there was really something that happened when I was in high school that we dedicated, or me first specifically, I dedicated my life to purity and to really just like, I'm not going to look like the world. And I wore like a wedding ring on my left hand, when I was 15 years old and that was like God is my priority until we get married, and it's like, it was like in the 90s or early 2000s, it was like purity culture. And now your new word is, consecrated.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yes.
Really, but like, my first love is the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's what David had above any other king, right? Is he was humble enough to know that like no matter what happens on top of like his leadership, it was always like he always had the humble beginning.
God first.
With the pasture, So I was kind of thinking about like for me now, obviously, the last 10 years has just been a blur with like kids and planting the church, and now the church is kind of sustainable and we're not like we don't need to baby it all the time. We can like really continue to make sure that the Lord is the first priority of our hearts personally. But like the last 5 years of starting the church has been like a grind as far as like I didn't have the amount of time with the Lord that I used to.
Yeah.
And there's a part of that is like God's grace was still sufficient in there, but now God's like, you know what, like you need to come back to your first love. Like spend more time with me because that's what I need you to be doing. Yep. So there's a really cool story. Obviously I like fire.
Yes.
But I kind of like to think of I discovered this passage reading through the Bible in a year, like on my own, and didn't hear it through a message. It's funny enough, like some of the best verses that I love in the Bible, like I didn't hear through a message.
Yeah. Like
I just discovered them, and God's like, that's the treasure. It's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
But Leviticus 6, which you're thinking like, does anything good
come out of
go.
Leviticus?
Go there. Come on.
Yeah, Leviticus 6, they're talking about the priests and what the priests do, and it says that there's a fire, the burnt offering, and the burnt offering fire, which is constantly like it never went out.
Ever burning.
It was just always, so they're like, they must have smelled like smoke all the time because they're just like fire keepers, essentially. And, I've always talked about my relationship with God being like a fire, like I want to be on fire for God, and I want it to be like not a smoldering, like tiny little thing, but I want it to be, rip-roaring on fire.
Right.
But it says that the priest would get up in the morning, they would take out the ashes from the night and from the day before, and then they would put on fresh logs.
Yeah.
And that's to me what the Lord always has been bringing me back to, of like, I need some fresh logs.
Yeah.
You know, you can't, like, your time with the Lord, like it captures, like, in the past.
Yeah.
You have great, you know, formational memories, but what you really were doing was you were learning how to build fires, and you have to keep building,
Yes.
Yeah.
like
Yes.
keep cultivating the fire.
Yeah.
And so they put fresh logs on,
Yeah.
and you know, to me, like, God's always wanting to put fresh logs, you know, on my fire,
Yeah.
and not being satisfied with, you know, 2024 or 2023 or even, you know, high school John's, you know, level of understanding the Lord. Like, there's new logs that need to be.
Best days
you
are
know,
in front of us.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
There's more. There's more. Yeah, it's not like our, you know, God's
There's
infinite,
more.
Yeah, God's infinitely more than we can ask, think, or imagine.
Yeah.
But it's like it's never stopping.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then they talked about in that passage also of like the priests would put on like special clothes when he's doing this, and like there's just this,
Priestly effort.
he was preparing and he was putting effort into the fire, and we have to put in that effort.
Mhm.
We have to be intentional
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
like our time with God, and how it's different and set apart
Mhm.
from just the other things that we're doing.
Yeah.
You
And it's
know?
kind of just this reassurance too, because in the night the fire did dim. You know, we're not blind to the fact that the priest has to come in and take the ashes out and put in new logs overnight. That was not a blazing, burning, you know, heaping fire. It slowly got dimmer, but it's the ebb and flow of like
Yeah.
the priest had to tend to his duties elsewhere, walked away, and then came right back with the same amount of zeal, the same amount of care, put on the effort, put on the effort and the intention, and place new logs into that fire. There's an ebb and a flow to it, but God is still sufficient and present
Yeah.
through all of it.
Yeah. And Joanne and I've talked about like we can't go back to, you know, our no responsibilities.
Yeah.
Like just spend time in the prayer room and
Yeah. Priests
you
can't
know.
sit in there all day heaping on more
yeah,
logs.
like but that's not an excuse to say, you know what, we have to continue to tend the fire
doesn't
of
mean it doesn't matter.
of our relationship with Christ, and be intentional about it, and you know, that's, and then what I love about the passage also is that they after they built the fire up again, then they would put it says they would put the fat of the animal on, which basically made it
Yeah,
like
pop. Yeah.
explode. Like if you put lighter fluid on a fire,
Mhm.
you know, it explodes. So the thing that talks about the oil in the Bible is always talking about usually the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
And you know, the logs to me is like the Word of God, and you know, put the Word of God and then add the Holy Spirit, and you can still make it blow up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we should
Totally.
always be wanting to
No
like
matter when.
to be on fire for the Lord, and not to be satisfied with, you know, being just halfway in, or letting the fire,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
smolder.
Yeah.
Wow.
Come on.
What a story
Yes.
testimony moment.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on in those stories. Thank you for
Right.
that. As we close out, and I think you've already given some
So
vision
much, man.
and some like hope for our church to maybe hold on to as they're listening to
Yes.
this and going from this. But if you were to leave our church, a lot of our youth listen to this podcast with like a hope or a commissioning message idea, what would you want to leave with our listeners, with our church family?
Yeah. I think, you know, I just come back to, we should all desire to be like David, right? Like if there is somebody that, you know, for me kind of encapsulates what it means to, you know, follow Christ, it's David, and how his hunger for God fueled everything else, you know, and we should all, you know, I prophesy over you today,
Come on.
you know, to have a heart like David, to be humble, you know, like for me, I don't feel very extraordinary. I don't feel very like, I don't feel like I have the most amazing gifts in the world. I just was looking at the next Goliath in front of us and saying, you're making my God look bad. Like, I want to, I need to be about the Father's business, right? I need to.
Yeah.
So I think if you feel ordinary, if you feel like I don't know what to do next, or I don't know how to, make my life meaningful, just stay in the game, just continue to be like David and show up and be faithful with, tending the flock. Or if you're in a season of, being a warrior, taking down the Goliath in front of you, or if you're in a season kind of like us now, for like me and Joanna, where we have responsibility and a kingdom to kind of watch over, and like the small responsibility wasn't too small for David, and the big responsibility wasn't too big for him, and that just it compounds, right? Learn the lessons in the pasture, learn the lessons in the caves when you're running from people and you feel like the world's out to get you. Learn the lessons and be in the moment, right? For me, again, just faithful with whatever the situation was that God had called me into, whether that's junior high ministry, like seeing those junior hires as world changers. Junior hires, you're world changers. 12, 14 years old, give me some of those
It's
kids.
not for tomorrow, it's for today.
Yeah, let's go. But
on.
then, like, when you're in college, or if you're you have responsibility, like, use, just be faithful with that, with whatever God put in your hand.
Wow.
Come on.
Well, friends, that is the first episode of For the One podcast in 2025, and that was a phenomenal episode.
Yeah, let's go. That was beautiful.
Hope this blesses you.
Yes. Man, we're so grateful for God's continued just outpouring of His Spirit in this place. It's been an incredible couple of years just in this building already. The things that we've seen God do and the miracles that He's worked to get us here and to fuel this fire that has been burning within this church. It is in no small part. It is in no small part because of you, John, and because of Joanna, and because of your leadership in this church, and your hunger personally, not just for, to see the church explode, but for your personal desire to see the name of Jesus spread, to see the name of Jesus magnified in your lives and in every life that touches this building. And that shines through.
Yeah.
That's what sets this community apart from any that I've ever experienced. That's what's beautiful here. And I from me to you, and I'm sure from everyone in student life, we just want to say thank you for doing all that you do, for your leadership and your continued devotion to just making Jesus famous and allowing us to come along for the ride in so many of these things, do our part, steward the field, hold our ground in the lentils and just work through.
Lentil field.
Yeah. And, I can't wait to see, specifically with our, our young listeners, our students, my kids even, of like the fruit that's coming.
Yes.
But obviously a lot of the growth happens just when no one's watching.
Yeah.
A lot of the growth happens when under the surface and nobody sees it, and in the private times, in the pasture seasons, but just keep showing up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like, that's what I tell myself every day is like,
Don't
God,
get discouraged.
it's a new day. It's a new opportunity. For me, we see so many people that are just showing up, and they're going to grow if they just keep showing up. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege to be at OneLife, and it's crazy of what God's done, but Like we were just the vessels.
Right.
You know, we're just the vehicles that are bringing the message. And as long as we don't confuse ourselves with, we're not the message. He's the message. He's the thing that that's going to change people's lives.
Yes.
You know, let's just keep showing up.
Come on.
Friends, that is the For the One podcast, episode 1, 2025. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.